Girl saves leopard from thirst. When she brings it back, shocking thing happenethi. Leopard lay motionless beside what had once been the Mara River. Her spotted coat pressed against the cracked earth, where water should have flowed, but now only dust remained. Wildlife researcher Emma Sinclair had been tracking the drought's devastating impact across the reserve for 3 weeks, documenting the migration patterns of desperate animals seeking water sources that had vanished under the relentless African sun. But she had never encountered anything as heartbreaking as this young female leopard, collapsed in the shadow of dried reeds. Emma approached with the careful steps of someone who understood that even a dying predator retained the potential for one final dangerous surge of strength, though this leopard showed no awareness of her presence. The great cat's breathing was so shallow it barely lifted her ribcage, each inhalation seeming to require conscious effort rather than the automatic rhythm that should have sustained such a magnificent creature. Her golden coat, which should have gleamed like burnished copper in the morning light, had dulled to the color of old brass, matted with dust and the evidence of days spent searching for water that no longer existed. The researchers' trained eyes catalogued the signs of severe dehydration that painted an increasingly grim picture of the leopard's condition. Her normally bright amber eyes had sunk deep into their sockets, surrounded by the dark hollows that marked advanced water loss. The pink of her gums had faded to an alarming pale gray, and when Emma gently lifted the cat's lip to check, the tissue felt dry as parchment against her finger. Most telling was the way the leopard's normally sleek sides had drawn inward, creating sharp angles where smooth muscle should have curved gracefully beneath her spotted hide. This drought had been the worst in living memory, transforming the usually lush Masai Mara into a landscape of death and desperate migration. Emma had documented the mass movement of wildebeest toward distant water sources, had recorded the increasing aggression among competing species, forced to share dwindling resources, but she had also witnessed the quiet tragedies, the animals who simply ran out of strength before finding what they needed to survive. This leopard appeared to be another casualty of the climate crisis that was reshaping the entire ecosystem. The morning heat was already beginning its daily assault, promising temperatures that would reach well over 40 degrees Celsius by midday. Emma understood that without immediate intervention, this beautiful predator would not survive to see another sunset. The leopard's current position offered no protection from the sun, and her weakened condition meant she lacked the strength to seek shade even if she possessed the awareness to recognize her need for it. Emma knelt beside the dying cat, close enough to see the individual whiskers on her small muzzle, and the way her nostrils barely fluttered with each labored breath. The decision to intervene came not from any expectation of success, but from the deeper understanding that no creature should face death alone, especially when human activity had contributed to the environmental conditions that had brought this magnificent predator to the edge of extinction. "Hold on, beautiful girl," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast silence of the drought-stricken landscape. The leopard's ear twitched slightly at the sound, the first sign of awareness she had shown since Emma's arrival. Emma's first act was to create shade for the dying leopard, using her field equipment and the thermal emergency blanket from her research kit to construct a makeshift shelter against the punishing sun that would soon transform the dried riverbed into an oven. The leopard remained motionless as Emma worked around her, showing no response to the human presence except for the occasional flicker of an ear when fabric rustled in the hot breeze. The shelter was crude but effective, casting precious shadow over the great cat's golden form. Just as the morning heat began to intensify across the barren landscape, the delicate process of rehydration required infinite patience and respect for an animal whose instincts, even in near death, recognized humans as potential threats. Emma began with single drops of water placed carefully on the leopard's dry lips, watching for any sign of swallowing reflex before attempting to offer more. The first few drops simply rolled away, absorbed by tissues so desiccated they could not immediately process the life-giving moisture. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the leopard's tongue began to respond. That rough pink surface, emerging to capture each precious drop as it was offered, as the day progressed into the scorching heat of midday. Emma maintained her vigil with the dedication of someone who understood that healing happened on nature's timeline, not human expectations. She repositioned the shelter as the sun moved across the sky, ensuring continuous shade while monitoring the leopard's vital signs for any indication of improvement or decline. The great cat's breathing remained shallow, but began to show subtle signs of stabilization, no longer carrying the desperate edge that had marked her earlier struggle for survival. The first real breakthrough came as afternoon shadows began to lengthen across the drought-stricken landscape. The leopard's eyes opened fully for the first time since Emma's arrival, those amber orbs focusing with growing clarity on the human face that had been her constant companion through the long, hot day. There was no fear in that gaze, only a weary assessment that seemed to recognize Emma as ally rather than threat. A profound shift in perception that marked the beginning of trust between two very different species, united by the fundamental struggle for survival. Emma's water offerings graduated from drops to small sips as the leopard's swallowing reflex strengthened, and her body began to respond to the slow rehydration process. Each successful intake was a small victory, marked by the subtle improvement in the cat's alertness and the gradual return of moisture to her gums and nose. The researcher found herself moving in harmony with the leopard's needs, offering water when those amber eyes met hers with what seemed like request, providing gentle shade adjustments as the animal shifted position for the first time in hours. Through the long afternoon and into the cooling evening, an unspoken communication developed between them, built on small gestures and patient observation. The leopard's ears began to track sounds in her environment: the distant call of a ground hornbill, the rustle of dried grass in the evening breeze indicating that her awareness was expanding beyond the immediate fight for survival. Her breathing deepened into something approaching normal rhythm, and twice Emma observed the leopard lifting her magnificent head slightly, as if testing her returning strength. "That's it, girl," Emma whispered, as darkness settled over the reserve, and the leopard managed to shift into a more comfortable position. "Take your time." The night brought cooler air and the promise of another day, while stars emerged above two souls who had found each other in the vastness of a world made harsh by drought and softened by compassion. The leopard's decision to rise came with the first golden light of dawn, her powerful legs gathering beneath her with a determination that spoke of purpose beyond mere recovery. Emma watched in wonder as the great cat pushed herself upright, muscles trembling with effort but holding firm as she tested her returning strength against the demands of standing. But instead of moving toward the water Emma continued to offer, or seeking a more comfortable resting place, the leopard did something that stopped Emma's heart. She began walking with deliberate steps toward a cluster of sandstone rocks 30 meters away, pausing every few strides to look back with eyes that held unmistakable urgency. The invitation was so clear, it transcended the barriers between species. A desperate request for Emma to follow that carried the weight of something vital waiting to be discovered. The leopard's gait was unsteady, but purposeful, each paw placed with the careful precision of an animal who understood exactly where she needed to go and why. Her amber eyes kept returning to Emma's face, checking to ensure the human was following the intensity of that gaze speaking to secrets that had sustained her through the long night of suffering. As they approached the rocky outcrop, Emma began to hear the sounds that explained everything, the soft mewing calls of very young cubs, their voices carrying the particular vulnerability that belonged to animals still dependent on their mother for survival. The leopard quickened her pace, despite her exhaustion, disappearing behind the largest boulder, where shadows offered protection from both predators and the scorching sun that had nearly claimed her life. Emma followed, with growing amazement, rounding the stone to discover two tiny leopard cubs, no more than 6 weeks old. Their spotted coats, still fuzzy with youth, and their blue-gray eyes wide with hunger and confusion. They pressed against their mother's legs as she settled among them, their relief at her return expressed in urgent mewing and desperate attempts to nurse from a mother whose body had prioritized their survival over her own. The shocking truth crystallized in Emma's mind: this magnificent female had been dying of thirst within walking distance of water because leaving would have meant abandoning her cubs to certain death. The mother leopard's sacrifice became clear as Emma watched the family reunion unfold in the shelter of ancient stones. She had endured days without adequate water, had pushed her body to the very edge of survival, all to remain within protective distance of cubs too young to follow her to distant water sources. Her maternal instinct had overridden every survival impulse, choosing slow death over the possibility of losing her offspring. "You amazing mother," Emma whispered, tears blurring her vision as she witnessed love in its purest form. The evening wind stirred the dry grass around the rocks as the leopard family settled into their reunion, 3 spotted forms silhouetted against the setting sun in a tableau of devotion that would echo through Emma's memory for the rest of her days.